Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to tackle a huge question. How does a massive group of people, we're talking millions, suddenly decide they're all part of the same team, a single nation? Believe me, it doesn't just happen. It's an incredible story about how some powerful forces, like machines and books, can literally build a country from the ground up.
So yeah, how does that actually work? Is it just about drawing some lines on a map and calling it a day? No way! It's something much, much deeper. It's a feeling that has to be shared. And the answer, as we're about to see, lies in this amazing collision between a revolution in how we make things and a revolution in how we share ideas. So let's get started with the engine of it all.
Okay, so our story really kicks off with the sound of engines, a deep, churning sound that changed everything. The Industrial Revolution, which got its start in Britain, wasn't just about a few cool new inventions. It completely rewired the entire global economy.
Before all the factories, making things was a much quieter affair, spread all across the countryside. There was this system, we call it proto-industrialization now, where merchants would give raw materials to peasant families, and they'd do the spinning or weaving right in their own homes. But the factory system, it just shattered that whole world. All of a sudden, you have these massive, expensive machines bringing everybody under one roof, where every minute of their work could be watched and controlled. This wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a total shift from the natural rhythm of a farm to the non-stop mechanical pace of the factory floor.
Now, this new factory system was unbelievably productive, but it was also unbelievably hungry. British factories had this massive appetite. They needed a constant flow of raw materials, like cotton, and they desperately needed huge new markets to sell all the cheap, machine-made stuff they were cranking out. And that kicked off this frantic, worldwide scramble for resources and customers, which had some pretty huge consequences for places like India.
And wow, this slide tells such a dramatic story in just 3 little bars. See, before all this, India was an absolute powerhouse in textiles. Just look at that first bar. Back in 1811, a full third of its exports were going to Britain. But then watch what happens. Just 40 years later, that number has totally collapsed, all the way down to 3%. And at the exact same time, cheap cloth made in Manchester factories starts flooding the Indian market. By the 1870s, it's more than half of all their imports. This isn't just a change in trade stats. This is an entire economy being flipped completely upside down.
But while the world of making things was being reshaped by steam and steel, something else was going on. The world of ideas was having its own revolution, a quieter one, but just as powerful. And it would give people the words they needed to understand and to challenge the massive changes happening all around them.
So back in the mid-1400s, this inventor, Johann Gutenberg, he takes existing tech, like the press they used for making wine, and perfects a system for printing with movable metal letters. It's so easy for us to take this for granted now, but you have to understand, its impact was like an earthquake. For the very first time, books, which for centuries had to be copied by hand, one by one, could now be mass-produced.
And the effect was just explosive. Get a load of this number, 200 million. By the end of the 16th century, that's how many printed books were floating around Europe. That meant information, big religious debates, new scientific ideas, radical political thoughts. All of it could spread faster and wider than anyone could have imagined, reaching way beyond the tiny circle of elites who could afford a handwritten book.
So here it is. This is where our two big stories slam right into each other. What happens when you take the huge economic pain caused by industrial colonialism and you combine it with this brand new, super fast way to spread ideas? Well, even though the printing press was born in Europe, by the 1800s it was a seriously powerful tool in India. Newspapers, pamphlets, books, all printed in local languages started connecting people across huge distances. It let them share their problems and, for the first time, start to imagine a shared identity. This is where you get the spark. This is the birth of modern nationalism.
Okay, so fast forward to the early 1900s, and India is basically a pressure cooker about to explode. All that economic pain we talked about was made even worse by World War I. The British were slapping on high taxes to pay for the war, and they were forcing villagers to become soldiers, which caused so much anger. And on top of all of that, you had crop failures and famines. People were really, truly suffering, and they were desperate for an answer.
And right at this very moment, a new leader, Mahatma Gandhi, comes back to India.
And he brings with him this incredible new idea for how to fight back. He called it satyagraha. The whole concept wasn't about beating your enemy with fists or weapons. It was about a deep, committed struggle for truth. A fight based on the radical idea of nonviolence.
I mean, just listen to how Gandhi himself put it. It was, in his words, pure soul force. The goal wasn't to destroy your opponent. The goal was to appeal to their conscience, to make them really see the injustice of what they were doing. This was a total break from the usual ways of rebellion, and it was an idea so powerful it could bring together millions of people who felt like they had no power at all. And you can see on this timeline exactly how that idea met its moment. All that anger simmering after the war was just ignited by a series of really oppressive moves by the British. You had the Rowlatt Act, which basically let them jail people without a trial, and then the absolutely horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre. These events just galvanized people all across India, focusing their anger and leading straight to the first ever nationwide unified movement, the non-cooperation movement.
But here's the thing. Unity is never that simple, is it? The rallying cry was for Swaraj, which means self-rule or freedom, but that one single word meant very, very different things to all the different kinds of people who joined the fight. Let's take a look.
So for a wealthy peasant farmer, Swaraj might just mean an end to crazy high taxes. For a business owner, it was about getting rid of colonial rules that were strangling their trade. But for a worker stuck on a tea plantation, freedom meant something much simpler, the right to just leave the plantation and go home to their village. And for tribal communities, it was about getting back their traditional rights to the forest. Everybody had their own vision of what freedom looked like.
And this right here is the key takeaway. What on earth brought all these different people together? It was that powerful, shared feeling of being oppressed under colonial rule. That was the glue. But because their experiences were different and their dreams for the future were different, that unity was always kind of fragile. It was full of arguments and conflict. Building a single nation out of all that, it was always going to be a messy, complicated job.
So, let's just zoom out for a second and look at the huge picture we've just painted. What we've seen is this incredible chain reaction. New ways of making things caused massive economic chaos. And when that chaos got mixed with new ways of spreading ideas, it created the perfect storm for a brand new kind of political identity to be born.
The factory and the printing press, they weren't just inventions. They were world-changing technologies. They created totally new economies, new social classes, and completely new ways for millions of people to imagine themselves as part of a community. They handed people the tools they needed to challenge empires and to start building the modern nations we see all around us today.
And that, of course, leaves us with one last big question for today. The factory and the printing press redrew the map of the 20th century. So what technologies, what new ideas and ways of connecting with each other are redrawing our map right now? What forces are shaping the identities and maybe even the nations of tomorrow? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.